Jeff prayed for us. I'd like to pray again, if that's all right. Lord, as we have sung, we do pray for open eyes. Not just to see all that's around us, but you'd open the eyes of our hearts. Lord, that we would perceive and understand, Lord, and discern as you do, that our hearts would be aligned with yours. Jesus, that we would see you high and lifted up in all things. We pray that you be lifted up in this time together this evening. We offer it to you, to your honor, to your glory. Amen. How many were in church Sunday, this church Sunday morning? Okay. So in my mind, this is a building block on block, principle on principle, piece on piece. If you weren't here, I encourage you to podcast it and catch up. We all have defining moments in our lives. Those encounters, those constellation of circumstances that at a particular point in our life set a course, set core values, establish core values in our hearts, open up horizons lots of times we never anticipated, relational encounters that play such determinative roles in how life opens up. And they do define who we are and how we live. And this evening I want to share a few of my life-defining moments with you. And so, John, if we could have the first one up. You've seen it a couple of times. Malawi, southern Malawi. The next one, first time I was there, it was in their, they have two seasons, hot and stinking hot. This is in their hot season. That's at 10 o'clock in the morning. There's no air conditioning. Half of the week there's no electricity, so you don't even have a fan. And it would cool down to 39 at night. You just lie on a mattress under a mosquito net, spread eagle like a starfish, just pasted to the sheet. You don't sleep. I was there in 2002 the first time, and it was the worst flooding that they'd had in 20 years. And that was the year after the worst flooding of the century. So they hadn't recovered from that. There were over 4 million people facing starvation. They were calling it the famine of the century in Malawi. Have the next one up, John, the third one. This is in East Bank, a section of Malawi that the river, the Shiri River, loops around, and this was flooded, and the bridge was washed out. So these people were cut off. They've been living on grass and leaves for 2 months. In rural Africa, you don't wear a watch to tell you what time it is. You wear a watch to know what day it is. They knew we were coming, but they weren't sure when, and they didn't want to miss it. You folks give me a wonderful welcome here. But that's one of the warmest welcomes I've ever received. Just the excitement, the anticipation. Next one, please. I had never seen poverty like this until that season 2002. I saw that old boy sitting in the village sort of square, as it were. And I just started crying. I said out loud, this is the crucible of irrelevance. What on earth do I have to say to these dear people? How can I say anything that will make a difference? And in the mercies of God, there was another elderly gentleman, I think I told the story, he had a stroke and he'd fallen into the fire, and was paralyzed from the mid-thigh down, and prayed for him, washed. If you took a pork roast and left it in the oven about 2-3 hours too long, that's what his leg looked like. I'd never seen human flesh like it. In the space of about 40 minutes, previously you could feel nothing, you could feel, he said to the pastor who was interpreting, had my hand on the back, he said, I can feel the Zungu's hand on the back of my leg. The Zungu is some, roughly translated, big dumb white guy. And after a while, he's jumping up and down on this thing, walking without a limp, and the flesh looked pretty good. 3 months later, he walked back to the village because Iris was doing another conference. 3rd-degree burns, no scar. I'd forgotten to ask his name. His name was Lazarus. Anyway, that was pretty cool. Next one, please, John. At the time, there were 1.6 million orphans in Malawi, a country of 12 million, without adult care. Iris, the organization I went with, has a monthly feeding program on the 15th of every month. Next one, please. Those are 80 pound, so 40 kilo bags of maize, corn. Put those on typically women's heads and then walk off with these things. You just watch these elderly women just wince because they know how much it's going to hurt, but this is what's going to keep them alive. I asked the pastor who was overseeing it, it's not in that picture, how far some of them had to walk. And he told me, and it didn't make sense. I asked him 3 times. Many of them had left their village at 5 in the morning and walked 5 hours to get here for 10, and then would walk back to 5 hours with the 40 kilos on their heads, with then 10 kilos of beans in plastic bags. Next one. This is the queue, 3,500 people. And the next one, please. These aren't just hungry people. These are folks who are at risk, who cannot, for all sorts of different reasons, feed themselves. This elderly gentleman, blind, for instance. That one bag, the bigger ones, that one bag will feed one person 1 meal for 1 month, and it costs 4 Canadian dollars. Sorry, that's a 12 kilogram bag of maize. One person, 1 meal, once a day for 1 month. And the last one, please. Oh, can you move it over at all, John, so we can see the lady in the red? Beauties. This is but one of or 3 of the folks of that 3,500. Louisa Lebecki and his wife Carota, and Fanny. These 2 are a couple. All 5 of their children are dead, as are their 3 grandchildren. There's no social support system. Without children, the elderly have no one to care for. Louisa used to work in the cotton ginnery, but it was closed down, and so he has no pension, no support. Rhoda's almost completely blind, so there's not much work. They don't have a garden because through his work, he severely injured himself, and he has no strength to farm. The old woman's Fanny, she's nearly crippled. They have adopted her. She was just sleeping out, just sleeping outside, eating whatever scraps she could fight off the dogs for. We interviewed these folks, and it was Franny who did most of the talking. The other two were kind of shy. That's what would you say to those in Canada who've helped you with the food, these $4 monthly bags? So thank you for your concern, that this is roughly translated. You really love us. No one else loves us. Please don't get tired of sending food. Please don't stop until we die. Those kind of encounters, seeing the kind of joy, the gratitude, and the hope that it stirred up, has left an imprint that is indelible. Half a world away, Prague, one of the world-class cities, beautiful city. I was in Prague in October of 2011, so about a month after September 11th. Was the end of the conference, was being interviewed by the editor of a Christian charismatic magazine. And at the end of the interview, he kind of switched the questions, and he asked me in the last 5 minutes to share my eschatological reflections in light of September 11th. But what did September 11th do for my end-time theology? I mean, I did not see that question. Well, September 11th really hasn't changed it. Because my understanding of Scripture, for all of the plurality of descriptions of the end time, what is crystal clear is that Jesus will come like a thief in the night. We will not be able to anticipate his coming. I quoted Matthew 24:36. This is Jesus speaking. About that day, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, not even the Son. So, if Jesus doesn't know when he's coming back, who are we to prognosticate? What we do know is it'll be like a thief in the night. And what is also crystal clear for all of the diversity about the end times, there is a single test. When he comes in that unexpected, unanticipated suddenness, what will we be found doing? Where are our hearts? Where are our heart's affections? Well, those weren't quite the answer that the editor was after, but I wasn't going to give him anything more, so that's where the interview ended. Went the next day to a pastor's meeting in Munich. And at the end of the question time, was asked the same question. Eschatological considerations in light of September 11th. It was a big book. So I rehearsed the same answers. This is Munich, remember. Home of BMW. I said, do you expect to drive your BMW into the end time? There was kind of a titter. And one woman at the back said, "Nein, my Porsche." Okay. How do you understand the Lord's blessing on your life? Is it a nicer car? Nicer and nicer and ever nicer car? Or a bigger heart? And somebody at the back said, "Why not both?" I said, "Okay. But which is more important to you? Which do you covet more? The bigger car or the bigger heart?" again, that is a defining moment for me, because it just kind of broke things open. I quite often flash back to sub-Saharan Africa. In the midst of whatever it is I'm doing, there is this counterpoint that I see that old man sitting in the town square. I'm convinced that our knowledge of God is only as good as our inclusion of the poor, the lost, and the last. But whatever new thing that's coming through the church, it's one of the first pieces I look for. Where do the poor fit into this? Did you guys spend a lot of time with Collins' Good to Great? How many of you know the book From Good to Great? It's a good book. It's a business book. And there were a number of churches that picked it up, and they were going to bring a whole new standard of excellence to all that they did in terms of being church. And I understand that. That's good. We don't want to offer the Lord a ragtag. But if excellence becomes core value at church, the poor have no place. Something's fundamentally wrong when the poor have no place because of the church's set of core values. If we keep asking the Lord, praying for more, without intentionally making place for those who have less, again, there's something fundamentally wrong with the way we understand God's heart and what it means to be His church. I want to read from Matthew 25, one of the parables of Jesus. Matthew 25:31. About the end times, when the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, He will sit on His glorious throne with all the nations gathered before Him. He will separate people into two groups, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He'll place the sheep on His right and the goats on His left. Then the King will say to those on His right, "You have my Father's blessing. Come, take possession of the kingdom that has been ready for you since the world was made. For when I was hungry, you gave me food. When thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was a stranger, you took me into your home. When naked, you clothed me. When I was ill, you came to my help. When in prison, you visited me." Then the righteous will reply, "Lord, when was it we saw you hungry and fed you, thirsty, gave you drink, stranger, took you home, naked, and clothed you? When did we see you ill or in prison and come to visit you?" Then the king will answer, "Truly I tell you, anything you did for one of my brothers here, however insignificant, you did for me." Then he'll say to those on his left, "Curses on you. Go from my sight to the eternal fire that's ready for the devil and his angels. For when I was hungry, you gave me nothing to eat. When thirsty, nothing to drink. When I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. When I was naked, you did not clothe me. When I was ill and in prison, you did not come to my help." And they in their turn will reply, "Lord, when was it we saw you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or ill, or in prison, and did nothing?" And he'll answer, "Truly I tell you, anything you fail to do for one of these, however insignificant, you fail to do for me." They will go away to eternal punishment, the righteous to eternal life. It seems to me that this is a passage that Jesus himself underlines. Verse 34 says, "The king will say to those on his right, you have my Father's blessing." It's the only place in all of the Gospels where Jesus refers to himself as king. Everywhere else, he's the one who serves, who empties himself, even unto death. Now this picture, in the end times, the one who has emptied himself, now exalted, the last, now first, from servant, now king. And I set us up, I asked Jeff if we could finish with open the eyes of my heart. We would see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. This parable makes it clear that if we're going to see him high and lifted up, exalted as king, we also have to be able to see him here, now, in the face of the least and the lost and the last. We can't see him there, as Mother Teresa called, in his distressing disguise. This parable says we won't see him high and lifted up. If you will, our final exam, come the end times, has only one question on it. It's asked by the exalted King of Kings, and it has nothing to do with orthodoxy. What we believe. Right doctrine. That's not on the exam. It has everything to do with orthopraxis, practical care. And that fusses us, or it ought to. The parable of the sheep and the goats is so uncomplicated. It ought to profoundly unsettle us. And its simplicity cannot be compromised. There's nowhere to go here. Again, that question that generated the magazine interview. The start of the interview, not where it finished, the 9/11 thing. The start of the interview, did I perceive any blocks to the coming revival in Germany? I've been asked that question right around the world. Asked it here in Canada, asked it in the States, asked it in England, throughout Europe, asked it in Australia, like I'm some sort of authority. Blocks to the coming revival. Yeah, I know a few. Matthew 25:34. It's one of them. It's those that feed the hungry, that satisfy the thirsty, that befriend the stranger, that clothe the naked, that care for the sick, that visit the prisoner. They're the ones inheriting the kingdom. That's the verb that's used there. Those practicing, exercising works of righteousness inherit the kingdom. James 2:5, the poor possess the kingdom. Matthew 19:14, the kingdom belongs to the children. Matthew 19:23, the rich have to try to enter if they can. That puts us at a disadvantage. I understand the kingdom being ultimate revival. Blocks to the coming revival? What about works of righteousness? What about the place we've made for the poor? What about the place we've made for the children? What about our lifestyle? See, I don't know, unless or until you've been with some of the poorest of the poor, if you're not driving a BMW, if you're not driving a high-end Mercedes, if you're not, most of us don't think of ourselves as rich. But in the world's economy, I said it some You had 2 meals today, you had a choice of clothes, and you have a grade 8 education. You're among the world's rich. You have access to a computer, you're among the world's super rich. How many computers did we play with from 7 to 7:30 here? 6, 7? We are among the world's super rich. And Jesus says we have to try to enter, and it's kind of iffy whether we'll make it. I've titled this message, Premeditated Generosity. And it comes from another defining moment in my life. Since 1996, when I first met Heidi and Roland Baker, they have become very dear friends. They've been the ones that have invited me to Mozambique and to Malawi, to some of their bases there. In 2000, we were among some of their first friends to hear on the private email, pardon me, of the catastrophic flooding. And I received that email and I just knew that I had to respond. Didn't want to be impulsive in it, and so decided to sleep on it, literally. Wanted to pray through it. The next morning over coffee, I had a figure in mind, and it was big. And just before I got ready to write the check and send it, I heard the Lord in my spirit say, double it. And that caused me to swallow hard. Because that check there then represented more than I had ever given as an annual tithe. But one of the things I know about life in the Spirit is that it is relational and that we follow the relationships. That there was no question in my spirit that I heard from the Lord that relationship. And as Heidi and Roland were such dear friends, and their ministry was facing such catastrophic need, because they were caring in ways that there were no NGOs able to do on a number of counts. I had to follow that relationship. For me, that's a kingdom principle. We're surrounded by needs all the time. We get overwhelmed. How do you steer through it all? I understand kingdom principles. We follow the relationships. Whom are you in relationship with? In terms of the need. What connections are you making with those who are helping in ways that, for whatever reason, you aren't, you can't, but you're in relationship with? Follow those relationships. And be praying into a greater generosity. That nature is nature transforming out. In that, then, there is a world of difference between gratitude and generosity. A number of you know are incredibly grateful for the kindness that the Lord has blessed you with, His faithfulness to you. That gratitude comes very, very easy. And that's a wonderful thing. I'm not diminishing that at all. Part of our giving is a thanks offering. Thank you, Lord, for all of your good. Generosity isn't opposed to that, but it is a whole other spirit that is cousin to, if you will, gratitude. But it's more than It really does reflect something profound. It reflects profoundly something of the nature of God, character of God. Since 1994, I have not had a salary. Some would say that I've lived by faith at 19 years. I am always quick to correct. I do not live by faith. I live by the faithfulness of God. I live by faith. I'd be in big trouble. Do I have enough faith? No. My faith is in His faithfulness. My faith is in my faith. I'm in deep weeds. My faith is in His faithfulness. For 19 years, the Lord has faithfully provided for my needs. Now, while I've been itinerating, that's come from three sources: through the love offerings that churches receive on my behalf, through my book sales, and then through the financial support of some individuals. There have been some folks who say, we want to help send you, especially to Africa, especially to the town. I'm very grateful for those folks. All of that being said, financially, it's been a roller coaster. The nice thing about a salary is there is a sense of what's coming in every month, and you can bank accordingly and plan and budget and everything else. Not so on this roller coaster. And there have been a number of seasons where there's been no income. No income by times for 4 or 5 months. That does make budgeting a challenge. But the Lord has been faithful. And every year somehow the bills have been paid. But again, it's been a stretch. In 99, after the first 5-month period of no income, I was awake in the middle of the night scheming. Because. And I was trying to figure who I could call and sort of schmooze and see if. And I heard in my spirit the Lord very clearly say, I'll do the asking. It was so, had such authority, my hands have been off ever since. And just in the Lord's elegant grace to confirm, I got an email the next morning from my Swiss host, my first international host. I've been back, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. The pastor said, just want you to know, we were praying for you last night. We love you. We want to bless you. We just wired $5,000 to your account. Now, this isn't 99. This is way before internet banking. Only the Swiss know how to do that. But we're just so gracious of God to confirm that word, I'll do the asking. His faithfulness. That released something. A few years later, as in Puebla, Mexico, doing a conference, a guy named David Greco from the States. I've never met Dave, knew nothing about him. Nice guy, great guy. We're staying in a hotel, wanted to get to know him, so we lined up to have breakfast that first morning. And he was also an itinerant. We were sort of swapping stories. We do have some stories along the way. And again, trying to get to know each other. He asked, what do you feel the Lord is really impressing on your spirit right now? And I've been a couple times at that point to Mozambique and to Malawi. And I told him that I had this growing conviction that kingdom obedience preceded provision. It kind of raised my eyebrow. I said, I know in my knower that when the invitation comes, I have to answer the Lord's call before I know how it's going to be underwritten, how the bills are going to get paid. And he asked what that would look like. That knowing. And I shared with him that I was still too much of a yo-yo. That I had it settled that I would go where I believed the Lord was sending me. But I was still happy when I received a big love offering. And I was bummed out when it was chump change. David then asked what I thought was a very discerning question. He said, how will you know when it's settled? And it was just one of those moments when I knew, just without even thinking about it. He said, when I don't count. About a year later, in another lean season, a number of months without any income, I was off to England. I left with about a quarter of the year's bills owed. And I finished a conference at the first church and was off to go to another church-based conference, and a young Baptist pastor had offered to drive me from one to the other. And this young Baptist pastor had recently been fired from his church for the stand that he took on the Toronto Blessing. And he and I had a lot in common. We stopped off at his house in between for a cup of tea. While he was in the kitchen sorting the tea, I figured that because it had been a fairly large conference, I'd better do a little inventory reconciliation of how many books I'd sold and what had come in. And I just released the desk because we cannot fly, and it sold quite well. So there was a couple $1,000s in the inventory. And when I pulled it out, I again heard the Lord speak in my heart, saying, give it to the pastor. And I laughed. And I understood as never before, 2 Corinthians 9:7, the Lord loves a cheerful giver. The Greek there is hilarion for cheerful. You get the word hilarious. The Lord, literally, it's the Lord loves a hilarious giver. Because it was in the natural, on the bottom line, it was kind of hysterical. I got a number of $1,000 debt at home. Here's several $1,000 and I'm going to give that away. I just wrote 2 Corinthians 9:7 on there. Again, knowing that there were several thousands of dollars in the envelope, knowing that there was more owing at home, and knowing the call of the Lord. I also wrote the next verse, 2 Corinthians 9:8. God is able to make all grace abound, so that at all times, in all things, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. It certainly blessed the pastor. It also blessed me. And again, by way of elegant grace, at the end of that 10-day tour, I received larger offerings than I'd ever received, such that it exactly met my indebtedness, with a small exception. Part of the debt that I had was an invoice for the dance books. They were published originally in England, so I had to pay the invoice in UK funds, which I could do. But in order to do it, I had to open a UK bank account. So I knew what my debt was at home, what the bills were. That I could pay, and I had £3 extra, which was exactly what I needed to open a UK bank account. And that, again, for me, brought this heart conviction that the Lord is able to make all grace abound, such that having all that I need at all times, in all ways, I will abound in everything. these ongoing revelations are what have, for me, opened up life large. I hope and trust that I continue to strive to be generous, because I know that's who He is. I want His life living in me. I want His life living through me. That's who He is. That's what He does. That's what has to characterize my life. Now, just in case any of you are nervous, we could take an offering tonight. I could show the pictures again and allow you to take a special missions offering, give you an opportunity to kind of open things up in terms of generosity. You could pull out your wallets and ask, Lord, how much would you have me give? And some of you might hear Him say, give it all. And if you're obedient, that might be a wonderful release for you. Some of you might be staring at your wallet and looking inside it and kind of going, I'm not sure that I'm hearing God here. Well, I can help you. What would it be like if we got you each to pass your wallets over one, and you're then holding your neighbor's wallet, asking, Lord, what should my neighbor give? My guess is you'd all hear God pretty clearly then. I'm not going to pass the bucket. Because the issue in terms of heart isn't what would be given tonight as a spontaneous act. Really, it's what happens tomorrow, what happens next week, what happens next month, what has happened to your heart. Is there this sense of the Lord calling, the Lord stretching, the Lord opening? Is there a sense of a stirring unto a premeditated generosity, such that you have it settled, that when there is the opportunity, that the response will be a generous one. Doesn't really matter where, it doesn't really matter when. The biggest ones will be relational. But is there this fundamental setting in your own heart and in your own spirit that you're choosing the largeness over the small, over the clinging, over the grasping, over the hoarding, over the fear that there won't be enough, over that grasping that says you have to look after you. So last thing, that's an orphan's heart. That's not one that's in relationship, intimate relationship with a Heavenly Father who is able to make all grace abound, such that at all times, in all things, having all that you need, you will abound in every good thing. That's His will for your life. What might your life look like if you got that settled? That's who He is, that's what He does, that's what He wants to do in and through your life. That's my hope and prayer for it. We'll build on that on Saturday, and then again on Sunday. Saturday, I certainly intend to give us time for some interaction back and forth. So I commend that passage to you, 2 Corinthians 9. The whole chapter really, but those middle verses, 8, 9, 10, 11. If you want some homework, I encourage you to spend the next couple of days there.